So first, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this call, Zoom call, and our tea time event today that is going to focus on education in Burundi and in the diaspora. But our presenter for the other part of the talk is originally from Uganda, yes. So the presentation is going to mostly focus on the experiences of Africans in the diaspora. But then originally she comes from Uganda and she's going to introduce herself. So because we can't keep waiting for the facilitator, Emmanuel, I'd like to give this time to Dr. Ogwal, who is going to be our presenter for Uganda or from Uganda, to introduce herself. And then we'll have Don. I think most of you know Don, at least those who have been at MS, you know Don is our very recent alum, 2021 alum from Burundi. He is also going to be our presenter. So the order of presentation will be Burundi first, which will be done by Don. And then we'll have Dr. Ogwal go next, and then it will continue like that. I see Emmanuel is here. Emmanuel, I didn't do much. I just did the introductions of the speakers. And this time I'd like to start with Dawn, if you can briefly introduce yourself, and then we have Dr. Ogwal introduce themselves, and then you can go back to beginning the presentation. Other than that, everybody, please feel welcome.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, Damaris.
Should I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Like, it's amazing to be here again. Like, it's the second time I get invited to this Africa Tea Time, and it's always a pleasure to meet the African diaspora and other partners, like from the MSU family. My name is Iradukunda. I originally come from Burundi. I graduated from MSU this past spring, 2021. But prior to my graduation, I was working on various projects, like including like education and agricultural projects in Burundi, but with the help like of multiple foundations and organizations from the US. And a part of those programs and those projects was the starting of the Kikut International Academy, which is one of the, I would say, like most innovative schools like in Africa right now. And I'm transitioning out from serving as the operations coordinator from that program because right now, like I'm onboarding like into my master's program at Sciences Po Paris. So yep, that's a brief introduction about me. Yep.
Thank you so much, Don. And then Dr. Ogwal.
Hello, everyone. I am Susan Ogwal, or otherwise known as Dr. O or Dr. Ogwal. I am a recent completer of my dissertation, defended my dissertation earlier this summer here at the University of Illinois. Thank you, Lily. And I am, I graduated, or will be graduating, I should say, participating in our ceremonies later this year. But I came out of the College of Education where my specialization was in education policy and organizational leadership. I am currently an Illini Science Policy Fellow where I work for our Office of Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. And I am also a three-time alumni of the University of Illinois, where besides school, I am also very much strong in the backgrounds of social sciences, or social services, including mental health trainings, and then also in teaching, or I should say education and training with workforce development. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much. We're looking forward to learning from you in terms of the experiences of the African immigrants here in the US, and any other information based on your background. We'll be very pleased to hear that. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Don to go first, and Don, welcome.
Thank you again, Damaris. So for my presentation, it's gonna be like very simple. Like I'm just gonna be explaining the why, like why we started the initiative in Burundi, and then the type of impact the school is making in the country already. Like we are a year old, and like it's already making a huge impact in the Burundian communities, like, and I'm just going to be exploring the impact of like investing in young Africans, especially in giving opportunities to their undeserved communities. But before I get into that, I'm just gonna show everyone like how the school looks like. You will get to hear some voices from the students and from my other colleagues. And also, I know a lot of people don't really know much like about Burundi. That gives you a glimpse of what's happening on the ground. So I'm just gonna show like a little video, and yeah, let me know if it's boring at the end. I hope it's not. Let me share my screen now.
La vision en créant cette école, Village Health Fox avait l'intention de créer une école qui pourrait servir de modèle, un modèle d'enseignement, un modèle où on met en avant l'initiative, la réflexion, la créativité. C'est ça que nous voulons générer.
J'ai été créée par un membre du staff de KIA qui est venu à mon précédent école et qui nous a parlé de KIA. Mais après, j'ai appliqué ma candidature ici.
Les élèves qui étaient KIA sont de loin les plus motivés et les plus engagés dans leur propre éducation. Et si vous décidez de venir à KIA ou si vous êtes choisi, vous allez pouvoir interagir avec d'autres élèves de votre âge qui sont vraiment exceptionnels.
Mais il y a également l'apprentissage, l'immersion dans la langue anglaise. Parce que nous sommes dans l'East African Community et nous voulons que nos élèves, à l'issue de KIA, puissent avoir accès à toutes les universités au Burundi et même ailleurs, en Afrique, aux États-Unis ou en Europe.
Firstly, I wanted to study in a school that they teach in English, and as we know, English is the first international language. I mean that it is spoken in every country in this world, and I wanted to have the opportunity to learn in English.
KIA a ouvert ses portes en octobre 2020. Maintenant, nous sommes pratiquement à la fin de la première année et les résultats qu'on enregistre sont extrêmement encourageants parce que nos élèves, ils ont déjà le réflexe de la pensée critique. Ils travaillent en groupe et on met l'accent particulièrement sur les sciences.
KIA is more organized than other schools, and we do projects. We go to the community, research program like in entrepreneurship. We do event practice, which is a good thing that other schools don't have. Like we learn and we do practice of what we have learned. Like we do projects in EL, sciences, experience in biology and physics, and yeah.
En plus de cela, les élèves apprennent l'entrepreneuriat, le leadership entrepreneurial, ce qui est un atout par rapport à d'autres écoles.
Ici, nous avons un certain cours d'entrepreneuriat et durant ce cours, nous apprenons beaucoup de choses. Ils nous apprennent par exemple les qualités que chaque leader doit avoir ou comment gérer son propre projet. Ils nous aident à réfléchir genre ce que nous voulons faire après pour aider notre pays, mais aussi le monde entier.
I have found many things like KIA have helped me to be a Rise Applicant, and which is an organization who help young future leaders who have done an impact on their community and help them to have a good education, be in a good university, and have a good job in order to serve their community.
Yeah, was everyone able to watch that video and hear everything?
I did, but I couldn't understand French, but it was great.
Like I'm just going to narrate, like, and talk more about the school. It was just a video to show you about the students, about the daily lives, like, of the school. And then I'm just going to explain a little bit more about the school. So KIA was started as one of the initiatives of Village Healthworks. And Village Healthworks is one of the prominent grassroots organizations in Burundi. And then it works in the sectors of healthcare, like education, community engagement, economic development programs. So like various programs, and then with the goal of holistically tackling development and poverty in all aspects it could come from. So KIA was one of those initiatives that was started by the organization. And I was helping me, like, and a team of other two amazing colleagues, like, who were in charge of starting the school and running it. So the school has a vision of developing the future leaders of the country and giving them hands-on experiences so that they can develop hardcore skills to be useful in their communities, not only when they graduate, because that's the usual, like, narrative, like in Africa. You need to graduate to mean something for the community, to the community. So what we do is that we take students, the selection process is very rigid. We take students from the best school, not really from the best school, but students who have the highest grades and students who have, like, a lot of potential of becoming leaders and people who've shown something, like some entrepreneurial spirit in their young age. And then the selection categories, like, it's by age range, unless there's, like, a huge exception to be made. And then we usually recruit, like, students between the age ranges of 13 and 15. In Burundi, that's when you finish the first level of secondary school before you go into high school. And then we look at the national exam score, and we look at those other criteria. When you get into KIA, yes, of course, you're going to follow the traditional learning in class, in theories, like we all did, like most people are accustomed, like in the African education system. But what's good, like with being in KIA, is that in addition to getting the theoretical side of knowledge, you get to experiment what you learn. As I said, KIA is on the Village Healthworks campus. Village Healthworks has a clinic that is fully operational, laboratories, like nurses, doctors, chemists, like physicians, a lot of resources that everybody can use. We have an economic development program, which I was coordinating as well. And then in that program, we do a lot of agriculture innovations, like, and then we prototype those innovations and we scale them up in the community around Kikut and also in the country. So students, let's say, for instance, in chemistry or biology, they can learn about a concept, but that concept, the learning won't stay in class. They will have the opportunity to be escorted by their teacher, be mentored by a physician and a doctor who will be able to not only answer to their questions, but also show them the importance of those skills, and then be able to stay with them for the remaining of the school year in order to develop a project. It can be a personal project, or mentor them in following whatever project he is or she is working on. So that's the type of experience that we provide at KIA. Not an experience that stays in school, but an experience that can be imported or exported outside of school, depending on the context. So what happens after the students go into their, like, summer holidays or Christmas holidays? In the Entrepreneurial Leadership course, which is one of the foundations of the school, it's a course that helps the students analyze, detect problems in their communities, and we provide them with the tools to analyze those problems and evaluate solutions. And with the help of the other members of the communities, they can then start prototyping potential solutions, which are going to be run in their communities when they go home during summer or like during their holidays, and still with the support of the school. So what we try and develop, it's a community of change makers, a community of change makers that is built from an early stage of their lives. People, we try to give the tools to people who have dreams, to students who have dreams, to be developed, to be in an immersive and supportive environment for their brains, not only to develop those ideas, but to also create a network of other Burundian change makers, and then to reduce the dichotomy of like people like believing in ageism as the only parameter to establishing some type of social changes. So that's what we try to do. And then so far it has been successful. From like what you're hearing, we last year we got a student, no, actually it was in March, it was a student who was selected as part of the RISE program. RISE program is a new like initiative by the African Leadership Foundation and the Smith Foundation, which invests in 500 African young leaders and then help them develop their projects by providing mentorship and financial assistance. That type of opportunities is an opportunity that could never have gone to a Burundian student. First, because of numerous challenges, technological challenges. Burundi, like in Burundi, like we don't have that much access to internet. And even if we do, it's probably like in professional settings because of the lack of resources schools have, and like, you know, the financial constraints to be honest. And then the other challenge is the use of English. In Burundi, like our education system is in English. But at KIA, we've been able to model and prototype a curriculum that is bilingual, where students can follow the national curriculum, but also in their fourth year, they're able to compensate for the courses they haven't learned or the topics they haven't explored in the national curriculum in English, and then they are able to pass the Cambridge exams for those who would like, and therefore apply to universities abroad. And then these students from the early stages of KIA, having these students go through the program and be successful from a pool of applicants of over 10,000 young Africans, and then having two students who have recently been selected to attend one of the, I think the most prestigious high schools in Austria, just after the first year, is showing us that the impact we're trying to make in Burundi is actually possible. And then that's only speaking about the educational opportunities that the students are getting, and not mentioning the projects that they're running in their communities. We have students who've gone back to their communities, and then thanks to the mentoring they've been receiving from the economic and development program in terms of agriculture, they're seeing like how farming in bags, you know, can be like a working concept, like in some of their communities. They're seeing how education can be used to propel like one's like development. So they are learning and they are eager to participate both in class, but also take those skills back into their communities, which was the vision of the school, the vision of the organization. And we hope that this impact will keep scaling not only on the national level, but it can be a model that can be adopted like everywhere in Africa. And I hope that, you know, we can start investing in the African youth, not only like on a tertiary level, but also like from the primary level, because a lot of issues that we found or the programming that happens in a kid happens in the early stages of their lives. So if we can invest in those young Africans, we can see like a different Africa, like an Africa that is conscious, and an Africa that can actually, you know, be impactful on a global landscape. Thank you. And I'm open to any question if there is any.
Thank you so much, Don. I always love listening from your talks. Remember last time you were telling us about your pizza chain initiative that you had started in Burundi, and now you're talking about an education institution that you're putting up together with your colleagues. It's always amazing to have young people thinking about tomorrow. And there's a time I was in one conference when somebody said Africa is in good hands with the young. I remember it's the Motor African Union that we attend, a group of our students attend, and other students from universities, because it's very impressive to know that from the experiences that you've had in your education system, experiences, exposure elsewhere outside your country, you've been able to put all this together and think of innovative ways that you can make a difference in the way that we teach, in the way that we conduct our curriculum generally. So honestly, that's very impressive. And one question that I had, and I know other people have, Emmanuel, are you able to connect properly now or not?
I think my connection has gotten better. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Let me ask this question and then I can hand it over to you to continue for the rest of the session. So I want at least to mention that it's connected, or the students in Kia are receiving, you're connected to the national curriculum, right? The curriculum that you used to teach is the national curriculum. But then you augment it with the hands-on activities, practical, innovations that students can be able to relate what they learn to impacting the community. That's what I heard you say. So do you see any challenges in being able to have students do both? Because I know sometimes the national curriculum can be very equipped, very lengthy, very deep. So how do you manage this? Like the students can be able to cover the national curriculum and see, do you have national examinations for students? So how do you balance both the material that you want your students to learn plus the national, completing the national curriculum, if I can simply ask that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And then, like, if I may share, that was the most troubling challenge we had from beginning January to end of April, because we had started with the vision of providing like Cambridge A-level like exams. But we are a different school. We are a school that is very inclusive, that does not discriminate, that does not practice any financial that discrimination. Because in most of those innovative schools, the financial fees or the school fees are the biggest constraint from people to attend. So what we do an inclusive selection process. So if you have the grades, if you have the potential to get into KIA, you will get in, and then we'll offer some type of financial aid. But we are not educating or forming students to follow the traditional career path that everybody has taken. We're equipping the students to be change makers, like regardless of the age. We are giving yes, you graduate, you get a diploma, but it does not mean that, it means that you have the skills to take on a project if you want to be like entrepreneurial, to get into contact with like a researcher and do your own, be independent and impact your community without the mentality that you have to be impactful, you have to have, received some type of ranking or some type of educational badges. So we use like the national curriculum, because we realize that for students who might not afford education abroad, and since we cannot guarantee scholarships like abroad, for students who want to attend universities in Burundi, they need to have followed the national curriculum. That's the only way you can embark into a university pathway in Burundi. And then to complement on the type of, to kind of address the challenge that you mentioned, we recruit teachers from all over the world, teachers who can teach in French and teachers who can teach in English. And therefore we use like a model that, yes, students have some time where they're following the national curriculum, but they also have a time where they're following, we call them KIA main courses. That's entrepreneurial leadership, that's global perspectives, and that's English as a second language. And those courses, they are so broad and they touch on almost everything. And that's how we get to give those skills to the students in addition to the traditional courses they're getting. And those courses are fully given in English. So the students can start practicing in English. And also the environment, the school environment is fully in English. So every interaction that you can have with a professor, although they can speak French or Kirundi, it's gonna be fully in English so that we can prepare the students to be competitive in both languages. So yes, it's definitely challenging, but we found a way to create core courses that are interesting, that are in English. And then when they're in their 4th year, since they already know the English, and since, oh, that's something I forgot to mention, we're a STEM-based school. So we really focus on sciences because we could not afford to focus on, a lot of subjects. Since we are a STEM-based school, we've been able to do a kind of mirroring between the Burundian curriculum and the Cambridge curriculum to see where they overlap, and the courses where we can compensate on in the 4th year, so that the students who would like to go into universities, let's say abroad, can compensate on those courses and then learn, do the SATs if it will still be a prerequisite, and then be able to compete and be able to get limitless opportunities. I don't know, I think, is that clear?
Yes, thank you so much. I know it's
Thank
a
you.
challenge, but the way you're handling it actually would help make a difference, because you basically need to have your students learn both ways.
Yes.
But thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Emmanuel to continue with the other questions if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Damaris, and thanks, Don. I look forward to learning more. I see Lily had a hand up. I want to give her a chance to ask her question before I chime in.
Hi, thank you for that opportunity to speak. I enjoyed hearing about KIA. And my question to you would be more so, I figured out eventually that it was like the high school ages going on to university. But what benefit is it to them to be able to stay at KIA? I saw they were at their rooms, and I would like to know what that experience is like to be a student living at their school at that age level, and surrounded by students, of course, and just having a very productive environment at all times.
So let me know if I heard you right. You're asking about the student life, how the student's life is at KIA?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Because it appears that they stay at the campus site, right?
Yeah, it's a boarding school.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So in Burundi, it's very common to have secondary schools that are boarding schools. And then the experience at KIA, I think I went to a boarding school in Burundi. It's unlike any boarding school you will ever see in Burundi. Students have access to internet, something that is a luxury. I think if I can compare it to the US, it's almost accessible to the 1% in Burundi to have access to internet, a laptop, a Kindle for reading, an iPad, Zoom, be able to take classes online, being able to pass some LinkedIn certificates. That's the type of top-notch opportunities that we give to the students. And they live in an environment where professors are not seen as only educators. They're seen as mentors. They're seen as, people they can look up to. And then that's part of the selection process of that, of those, of the staff, because we don't want to bring people. I don't know if you're accustomed to the African education system, but people they are always intimidated by their teachers. But we want an immersive, a casual, and supportive learning environment. So that means that the professors are around. If you're a professor who, let's say for instance, I wasn't teaching, but I loved basketball. The first thing that I did there, there was no basketball court. I helped the building of the basketball court with the help of the students. So that's the type of initiatives. Another professor loves hiking. He created a hiking club with the student. Another professor loves playing ping pong. He created a ping pong group. Another professor is leading the French club. You know, those are the type of initiative that help us stay in connection with the students and build not a school, I would say a family, like a family of learners. Because through those experiences, we are learning a lot from those students. They come from various backgrounds of the country. They have various experiences. And I promise you, if you sit with one, you know, on a day, like you learn something new, and then vice versa.
I think I missed out. It sounds like a really awesome time. Thank you for sharing. I wasn't familiar with boarding schools, so I really am glad you went in depth about it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's exciting work that's happening over there, Dawn, and we're excited to learn about it with you. I'm curious to find out from you, what are some of the opportunities that having a bilingual model has opened up? Because often having one language of instruction can sort of limit the worldview or outlook of a group of people. How has, in this case, having that bilingual model opened up new opportunities for the students that you get to work with?
Thank you, Emmanuel, for that question. So when when we were thinking about the bilingual model, we wanted to emphasize on the fact that students should never be detached from their realities. Students should never be detached from their culture. They should never be detached from their country, and they should never be detached from their continent, regardless of the success they're going to have. And then Burundi, like, is a francophone country. We, like, you know, the first language is French. You know, like in the East, like in can you hear me? Hello, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
we lost you. You're back now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like in the East African region, French is like used by over 20% of the population, like including Congo, Rwanda, and then like, you know, the parts of East Africa. So we wanted the students to understand, to see the word as it is. Like the word is not only like a one-faceted, like, you know, like surface, like both, like in all sectors. So by showing them, you know, you gotta learn Kirundi, like you gotta make sure that, you know, you can present your idea or you can present your views in the national language. You need to know French, and you need to do just that, and English as well. That gives them not only like a well-rounded like perspective like around things, but also like it gives them the confidence that if they are able to thrive in an environment where they are practicing three languages, like, you know, there are few things that, you know, could really challenge them. And also when it comes to the educational tools that we use, they're very diverse. You get like, you know, French tools, which like usually speak on the West African, like, or East African, you know, history, political aspects, and, you know, like a lot of aspects that, like, you know, materials that you would not have gotten in English, and vice versa in English. So those are the type of opportunities, and then that bilingual system provide, and then like from those opportunities, we get to create, you know, various channels of cooperation and networking opportunities as well.
Thanks, Don. I can really appreciate how the students there would be better well-rounded with that much exposure. I see Olawale has his hand up. He has a question for you. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask Don your question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Don, for that wonderful presentation. I'm really amazed by that. And I'm from Nigeria, so I want to ask, because you talked about, you know, African teachers, you know, how traditionally they intimidate students. So I want to ask, how have you set, you know, standard to check if the teachers that are in the school, I mean, the professors in the school are following the objectives of the establishment. How are you trying to evaluate that to ensure that they are doing what the mission, following the mission, the goal of the establishment? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So on that, thank you for the question, Olawale. We do the way we do it, the selection process of the teachers, one main component of it is the practical teaching, like criteria. How can you interact with the students? How do you make sure that the students are following you and they're interested in the topic you're teaching? And then how do we assess that? We do mock lessons before you are even hired. We put you in a situation where you are even going to be teaching that class over Zoom. And we look at the interaction between you and the students. And then that's just one example of how we assess that. But the teachers also receive some active training on the ground from senior teachers, senior professors who have really feel in the deepest sense of their soul, what KI is all about. And they give them, because sometimes I believe that even the African teachers who are intimidated is because they've never seen better. They were never taught, as someone used to say, they're just victims of the system. And then sometimes where you're in an environment where everybody is practicing the same thing, whether you want it or not, you get to learn that and just practice that as well. So that's the type of environment KIA is, even on the staff level, where people learn from each other, where people support each other. And then even for the teachers, let's say, who might not, but that has never happened, who might not have, that drive to include students in the learning process, and also take students not only as learners, but as partners in education. We mentor them and we train them in how to do that.
The idea of having instructors that have embodied your values, model that for new instructors, I think is appealing. I see a question here from Ife in the chat that says, do you have corporate sponsors for the school or government help? Would you like to speak to that?
We didn't not we don't have corporate sponsors. We are we're an NGO, and then we use philanthropic and bilateral aid that go to such projects, and then through the main organization. And the government supports us extensively, especially in the acquiring of regulations, being able to be the school to be in the respecting all the laws, and if we need support resources from the education department, because they understand the type of impact we're trying to make, they support us extensively.
All right. Earlier on, Don, when you were sharing with us on diversifying the reach of the students, you also touched on sort of paying homage to the background, historical, cultural, the roots of the students. I was curious to learn, does the school also have pipelines that connect the students to existing Francophone systems? Like you have students trying to study in West Africa or other Francophone parts of the world. I heard you share a little bit about, I think, places like South Africa, the US, and I'm curious to know do you also have programming that focuses on the Francophone side of things as much as the Anglophone?
So to mention that we're just 1 year old. The planning for this school started in 2019. There are a lot of ground that we still have to cover, and that's definitely part of our objectives, to be as broad and as connected as possible. And then one of the main objectives or main tools we use, we have a type of connections program, which thanks to, not really thanks, but this remote reality that has allowed us to connect to a lot of key players in the world. Just like this Africa Tea Time, we have something called Connections, where the students, decide who they would like to interact with, all over the world, anywhere. And then we will do all we can to reach out to them. And then they will come and be a speaker. And then the students will be able to interact with them. Yeah, I just saw a chat, like a comment from Muta, encourage the students to apply to UWC school for their high school. So something like KIA is a high school on its own. Like it's a high school, and then we like we know about UWC, like African Leadership Academy, Aga Khan Academy, such. We are trying to be such type of schools and adopt like almost the same model, but in a more contextualized and then cultural relevant way.
Yeah, gotcha. When you talk about the use of Kirundi in your curriculum, do you find that it's helping develop disciplines like the sciences that are traditionally taught in like English or French? As you use Kirundi more, do you see the knowledge base expanding as a result?
So we don't really use Kirundi like in the when we are like teaching, like in the when we're giving lessons, but we have a Kirundi topic, like subject. These students, they are 15, 13, 14 years old. Some of them, they might know how to speak Kirundi, but let's say, for instance, they don't know how to narrate the history of the country. They don't know what has marked the traditional side of the country. So that's our approach through that lesson. That's our approach on how to keep things like, contextualized and Pan-African and also Burundian. Regardless of wherever you're gonna go, you gotta have a historical baggage that is in the language that you know, a language that you've used since you were born. So that's like, you're like, we are forming like, strong roots to where you come from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. Olawale, did you want to jump in? Did you have something you wanted to say? I see you unmuted yourself. But I was just going to comment that I think what you just explained, that in itself is innovative, because I'm from Malawi and even the local history is taught in English. And so having that ability to narrate one's own history in a language that is familiar to them is a strength in and of itself. So I can see how in time that might lead to you being able to do more across disciplines. And it's interesting that you're only a year old as an institution. I would have never guessed. I thought, that's testament to the level of work that you're doing. So kudos to you guys. Let's see. So anyone else that's wanting to ask Dawn a question, feel free to unmute and jump in or put something in the chat, and we'll keep this conversation going. So Dawn, are you trying to also collaborate with schools like ALA? You mentioned that you're already conversant with these institutions.
Yes, we're already connected to ALA, like through the entrepreneur, like it's the ALA is the founding, I'd say, like institution of the entrepreneurial leadership teaching model, like in the world. And then we are collaborating like with their lesson designers and curriculum developers in working. They've helped us in the first year and they're still helping us now. And then, we'll keep collaborating.
Awesome.
Don, can you briefly tell people what ALA is about? I don't think everybody knows ALA. Just briefly, so everybody knows what you're talking about.
So ALA is the African Leadership Academy. It's another innovative and like one of the pioneer innovative schools like in the world that is located in Johannesburg, South Africa. Their vision and goal is to develop the next generation of African leaders. And then how they do it, they select 100 students per year from all over Africa. They bring them into the academy and they give them the skills throughout the 2 years to be change makers in their communities. So they've developed the entrepreneurial leadership curriculum, and now they've created a university, like the African Leadership University, that is trying to scale the impact, the educational impact ALA was trying to make.
And the university is in Mauritius?
Yes, there is a campus in Mauritius, there is a campus in Rwanda, and I think there will be another campus in West Africa in the upcoming years.
All right, thank you. Back to Emmanuel, sorry.
Nice. Thanks for explaining. And it's nice to see, Don, that you're also, connected and also helping get publicity for these other institutions. It just speaks to the broader vision that you have, that you're thinking sort of beyond just what you guys are doing, but how you can plug into these other existing spaces as well. We really appreciate you sharing this with us, and we hope that the people on the call will also stay connected and check out KIA some more. And we hope you stay with us through Susan's presentation, which is coming up next. And if anyone else has further questions, please put them in the chat. We can circle back to Dawn before we wrap up. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Susan to take us through her presentation, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel and Damaris, and like everyone who's listening. It was a pleasure to be here. And feel free to connect. Like Damaris says, my email, like I think Emmanuel as well, like, feel free to connect if you have any question.
Thank you, Don. Hi, Susan, over to you.
Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Don. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I think many of us can relate to how much our education systems need a lot of help, and also a lot of just really good strategy to be able to really work with our youth and young adult population. So I really personally appreciate that, as I think through contextual ways to be able to continue with this aspect of education abroad and at home. So I am going to go ahead and pull up my slides here real quick. Give me 1 second. Okay, I hope that you all can hear me. If you can you, I cannot see the screen at the moment, so if you don't mind just saying yes, Emmanuel, let me know if I'm okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
You're good. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So once again, my name is Susan Ogwal. I come from the University of Illinois at Urbana, Champaign, where my PhD is in education policy and organization leadership. My focus was global studies education, and my research specifically looks at the intersection of higher education and immigration. And in this particular talk, I'm going to give you a little bit about my recent dissertation work and continuing work that I do as well in the community. Thank you again for having me, Dr. Choti, and everyone there at the African Studies Department. I also want to give a thank you for Dr. Ann Mutomia, who was also such a great colleague and classmate and friend during our time at the university. And so this is just a brief overview of a little bit of what I'll go through in the next few minutes. And then from there, we will have discussion. So first and foremost, just to help you kind of understand a little bit more about who I am besides the academics, I am a child refugee from the country of Uganda. Most of my career has really just taken off working within social services and education and training. And particularly in the last, I would say almost 15, 20 years has really focused on looking at and assisting African immigrants, particularly within the central Illinois region. And then a lot of my also voluntary work that I do in the community through consulting work and also through specialized transitional networking and coordination of resources. I've really just seen a lot that has happened within our particular communities as African immigrants, especially as they're trying to find adequate work that compares to our education at home. As I mentioned, I'm from Uganda, and so I really want to bring this forward first because this ties into why I'm also doing the work that I do. So many of you may or may not know, Uganda is located on the East African side of the continent. We are a landlocked country, but we are full of vegetation and greenery. So if you've ever seen Uganda or been to Uganda, one of the most beautiful things you'll notice is just how green everything is, how green and beautiful the nature is. So I want to give kudos to our natural habitat for that. We're also known for our wildlife parks, excuse me. And then a little bit of history. So October 1962 was when we received our independence from the British. Currently, and since 1986, Yoweri Museveni has been our president since then. It's been a long time, as many of you might know. And then as we are also members of the East African community, which involves Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. We are also known for our coffee, maize, tea, sugar, and base material metals, and a few other things as primary exports for our country. Our language primarily for our public sector, especially beginning with secondary school and upward, if you want to be considered serious, you have to learn English. And I say British English because we were formerly colonized by the British, and this has continued. And then, and so that aspect of English has continued. And I mentioned that because sometimes people assume that British English is the same as American English, and that's not necessarily true.
Hi, Susan.
Yes.
May I please ask?
Yes.
So your slides are not being shared. So were you trying to share them?
Oh, yes. Okay, hold on one moment here.
Yeah, I don't think the slide is showing to everyone.
Okay. Apologies for that. Thank you.
It's okay.
Okay, hold on one moment. My apologies for that. Okay.
It's okay. It's all right.
Okay, can everyone see now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, let me make sure that you all can see the screen here. Okay, so as you can see on the, I just tried to pull up some pictures to kind of give you some snapshots of Uganda. And I'm just gonna kind of go through this real briefly for the rest of the moment, just thinking again, or just repeating again that we have British English is our primary public sector and trading language aside from, or in addition to Swahili, and then some of the many various languages, local tribal languages that we have. We have a very young population also as well. Half of our population as of 2017 is 15 years old and under. And then one of the other most interesting things that leads me more a little bit to our topic is that we are one of the largest refugee receiving nations in Africa. At one point, we were the top receiving nation for that. And then at the same time, we're also one of the largest members of the African diaspora communities located in the US and the UK. So when we talk about immigration, which is very near and dear to my heart, I'm going to focus specifically on US immigration and policy. So looking at the various types, you can imagine, and when you take a look at it, they kind of divide up in several different sectors. You have family-based, you have employment-based, refugee and asylum seekers, you have diversity visa lottery, and then you have special visas. And these special visas include temporary protected status, U visas, which are traditionally known for those who are in violent or domestic violence situations, tourism, tourist visas, visitors visas, and so forth. So there are quite a few different ways that you can come into the US on a documented pathway here. But today I'm going to focus on diversity lottery visa, as that is the primary method of coming to the US that I worked with for my research. So a little bit about DV lottery, or diversity visa lottery as it's known. It began in 1990, or was enacted in 1990 through our legislative body of the US. And in this particular process, what it does is that this is supposedly to aim at diversifying the American communities here all over the US. And by doing that, they choose individuals randomly by computer, as technology has improved, but randomly selecting people who don't have as many people here in the US. So for example, currently, Congo is one of the leading nations that is underrepresented actually here in the US. And that's part of the reason why they continue to be part of the top sending countries as well. And then when you look at the annual cap is as 50,000 visas are handed out annually. And the main qualifications are that you have to have an eligible country. You have to have an equivalent of a high school, US high school education, and or the equivalent of the first 2 years of an American college degree. And then again, it's randomly chosen through a lottery. Currently, the most recent statistics show that Africans actually make up 40%, which is nearly 20,000 visa lottery holders that come to the US. Some myths about immigration in general, and particularly about African immigrants, is that, first of all, people think that there are not many Africans in the US, but the reality is that there are 2.1 million African immigrants in the US. Think about that, 2.1 million immigrants, and this is not including African students. There's often the narrative that African immigrants are unskilled, where the reality is that 44% of Africans are coming with professional, managerial, or technical skills. African immigrants are uneducated or don't contribute to the economy. But again, that has been debunked by that 40% of African foreign-born immigrants actually hold a bachelor's degree or higher and add nearly $10.1 billion in federal taxes, again, here in the US. And then there's this thought process that it's somehow not an Illinois issue. Oftentimes within the conversation about immigrants in Illinois, a lot of the focus is turned onto our Latino fellow brothers and sisters, also within the immigration system. And then often the conversation is about undocumented status. And part of that is because our agriculture sector often relies on migrants, agricultural workers to be able to help with our economy here. But the reality is that there's a very strong African immigrant population in Illinois, and it has grown from 12,000 to almost 78,000 since 1990. So my problem was that what we've noticed here, particularly within the state of Illinois, is that we have lots of African immigrants coming here through diversity lottery. They are highly educated, meaning that they surpass the education requirement on that DV lottery application. And yet they are finding themselves at work at factories, within the service industry. So you're looking at either Uber drivers, taxi drivers, you're looking at restaurant servers, you're looking at janitorial services, things like that. But yet these are persons who come from professional trainings that are doctors, lawyers, or professors and teachers in their home country. But again, this problem continues to persist, even though you have this highly skilled and trained population. And also on top of that, this is particularly a group that is coming to the US with document status, which makes a big difference. So then I asked the question, and have been asking the question, what are the experiences of highly educated African immigrants in Illinois? And then how are educational institutions and policies attending to these students, I wanted to know this a little bit more. A little bit of the literature review I was able to capture, and I'm not gonna read everything on here, but just it highlights some of both the empirical sources and the non-empirical sources that I've utilized within my study. And some of those topics included thinking about the integration methods that are different for Africans versus those who are non-African, or immigrant mobility, thinking about higher education and what its current or past responses were to immigrant students being on their campuses. And then also looking at African immigrants and employment within the US. Some of these studies, the few which did look at them, have actually shown that white South Africans actually still bore more availability and were sought out more with the same qualifications as Black African immigrants, but yet they were getting more acceptance into the job economy or getting more employment and so forth. And then again, also when you start looking at comparably, more African women were also getting more jobs versus African men. So I took on a qualitative approach where I, again, specifically wanted to look at African immigrants, particularly within Central Illinois, who were DV recipients. And I chose Central Illinois because A, I live in Central Illinois, and also two, we have a very, very large French-speaking population here. But not only that, but that population between who have come from Congo and DRC have added to the previous generations of African immigrants that are here already, who were coming from Nigeria, who are coming from Uganda, who are coming from other places within our African continent and are here. And so because our area exploded with so many immigrants within the last, I would say 10 years now, very, very strong. There was something about that. A lot of our community actually changed. A lot of when I say community, meaning that much of our school districts began to hold bilingual classes for their students. Many of our colleges began to open doors and increase the number of English-speaking, learning English or English as a second language classes. And then even those classes began to open up even more within the various community branches, such as churches opened up and things like that. So again, another big community change was that we had, for the first time in over 20 plus years, our first set of African grocery stores that actually were built and are functioning very strongly in our area here. I also want to mention that the data sources that I used for my methodology included both interviews and also various media sources. So things such as news reports, migration reports. I looked at White House memos, immigration school, and also websites again. I also began to look at this data from an exploratory perspective. One, because of the fact that this was really a subject that has been under, and I cannot emphasize that enough, that has really not been researched a lot. And if there has been very few studies that has devoted to this particular subject. A few of the findings. So just to highlight some of the interviews that I did, I was originally trying to get a larger number of interviews on top of what the data was showing me already, which was that we have these highly educated African immigrants who are coming to the US. They relocate themselves here within Central Illinois, and yet they are working in these low-paying positions. And in order for them to be able to find work, more often than necessary, they had to redo their education in some way, shape, or another. And so you have, for example, Dr. Z, who came as a physician, at least 12 plus years, also as an administrator. He came from Congo, and he ended up having to redo his education at as a medical doctor. And then again, also, and excuse me, I should say, redoing his residency. Currently, policy states for medical students or previous medical providers, they have to redo their residency when they get here into Illinois if they want to get back into that profession. Again, Mrs. B, who is now married to a DV winner, she was an entrepreneur, but she comes with a business degree and also on top of that, an associate's of economics. Yet she decided to go back to school and get another associate's in social work and then again, a master's in education. This is all in an attempt to try to find adequate paying work that would at least try to utilize her skills in education. And Pastor O, he came, he's currently a minister, he's from Congo, and he actually was just one semester shy of completing his architecture degree as an undergraduate, but ended up coming here, starting all over school again, and finished within the School of Urban Studies. So thinking through that, again, highlighting this situation that's happening within our particular community. Some of the data that also continued to come up was that there were several themes that kept standing out throughout my interviews, and highlighted before you. We have kind of like a life story picture. So what was going on for them before migration, what was happening in the early stages of migration, their resettlement moves, and how they tried to find and navigate their space and way into the US. And then what that means in terms of moving forward since they've been here. And then a little bit about reflections of life. I'm gonna just highlight one or two of these moments of conversation. So in this particular part of the interview, I was asking them about early transitional struggles. I'll talk about Mrs. B. She says here that, yeah, also people here, they were talking so fast, so I couldn't understand anything of what they were saying. So I chose to go back to school and learn English. So while I was learning English, I started taking some classes in social work because it was no sense for me to just go back and fix something I already knew. So I went back. I did my associate's degree in social work, associates in social work. And then in theme number 5, thinking about the reflections of life, I'll highlight Dr. Z here. So here he is talking about, since he had recently finished his residency at one of the hospitals here, he talked about this aspect of being different and noticing that since he's been here. So he says, so that is something I learned here, a minority group. I learned that being in that group, it's sometimes very difficult. You don't have the same opportunities. So you have to work really hard for the same thing. Maybe you are going to be judged. And again, Mrs. B. So every time when I talk to them, this is now her referring to her clients. When I do their hair, I discuss with them and try to make them understand that I have a degree. I'm not just here just to braid your hair. So again, in many ways, folks trying to reassert to their environment that they are smart, they're educated, and that they shouldn't be looked at in some way that's less than. So as I think through and have thought about the experiences that they had, I began to notice and found that much of their experiences was very much relational to the De-Culturalization Framework, which really was it was a theoretical model that looked at the fact that the education system here in the US, particularly looking at their ways in which they impacted and accepted or not accepted non-white citizens in this country, really took a negative perspective with that. So again, some of those things that when you're thinking about curriculum, we think about the fact that there have been attempts to replace all non-whiteness through education. So thinking about how you'll rarely find representations of yourself in your classes, whether it's through the teacher or whether it's through the actual curriculum book that you are studying. That there's an imposition of white norms and values over those of immigrants' homeland. So again, thinking through about the fact that because there's a lack of representation, now when you're discussing maybe examples in the classroom studies, or when you're trying to read something, a novel, or you have to write a research paper about, there's very little to no acceptance about some of the relational attributes that you can bring from your homeland. Again, this continuing aspect of this American validation over and over when you're thinking about students being recommended for other classes or recommended for jobs, there's this need to have an American professor validate who you are versus, again, thinking about these credentials that you have with you, and yet you know that you came from a good school and you came with a wealth of experience and knowledge from your home country. And policies that continue to have a negative effect on Black African immigrants as well. So I just want to posit and highlight here that overall, as I continue to explore the data and as I continue to look at this particular group, our group as part of the African diaspora, is that African immigrants are missing from the immigration conversation. We talk about our Asian immigrants very widely and broadly. We talk about our Latino immigrants very widely and broadly, but yet oftentimes we don't hear so much about African immigrants, particularly Black African immigrants, that there is a better need for supports for our immigration transition programs. Again, there's so many gaps and holes when we talk about what does it mean to be an African immigrant coming to the US versus being a white immigrant coming from maybe Europe and trying to adjust within your local community here. Labor shortages could be filled in critical areas, but again, qualified African immigrants are often not hired, and they're still preferred, white immigrants are still preferred over Black immigrants. Our immigration policy should consider the strengths of our citizens from descending countries. I don't know how much else I can emphasize that is when you look at the application process and you look at the applications of the materials that folks are bringing in, it's just unfathomable how much knowledge and wisdom that we have that can be contributed to our local communities and also regional as well. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to continue to finish up here, is that I just want us to be encouraged that as we think about immigration and think about the ways in which we can assert ourselves, let's begin to have a conversation about how we can create better policies to really help and assist this particular group. And then think about addressing the gap in literature. Where else are we missing in terms of having conversations concerning African immigrants? And that's it. And I'm gonna leave it there. I know it's a little bit long, so I apologize for going a little bit over 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I was trying to time myself, so.
No, I don't really think you did.
Okay.
You were within time, if I can say, because you didn't. So I think Emmanuel, you're about to leave.
Yes, I have to dash off to another meeting, but I enjoyed the presentation, Susan, and I'll let Damaris take us through the rest of the tea time.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Susan, for that very insightful talk about, first, I think it begins with your experience coming to the US. That's where it originates. Because most of us here, the people that are in this call, most of us would look at it this way. You have a choice. If you had for example, if you had a choice to work from anywhere in the world or to live anywhere in the world, you could. But there are so many layers into Susan's talk. One, there are people that come here as refugees. They have to leave their countries. They have to come here and make America home for themselves. And then there's another group of people that come through the diversity visa, the lottery visa. They're making America home for themselves. And then there's another group that come here, let's say for education, and you can choose to stay, you can choose to work from elsewhere. So it's so many, it's not one way of looking at it. So there's so many ways that you can begin to even discuss your presentation. So I'm making that clear for people who could be like, if you feel that America is not home for you, you can be elsewhere, for example. But Susan is talking about everybody else who is making America home for many reasons, by choice or by default, by just the fact that you have to make America your home for some reason. So before I open it up for everybody else, I wanted to ask a question. This is not personal, but it's related to your work. So in what you're doing right now in your office, what types of policies do you think your work is meant to speak to? You know, like in that related to the immigration process and everything else, the experiences. So what's your work doing to you know, affect the process, if I can ask?
So my work is actually not specific to immigration at this moment. Mm-hmm. So our project currently is focused on agriculture equity, actually, in the state, and then also looking at food security initiatives. And while it may not be explicitly related to our immigration policy, it does, those particular subjects actually impact our residents here within Illinois, and which a large group of our population are immigrants. So especially through this past year with the pandemic, we've had a lot, and I'm sure you all have seen, issues with families who are in need of food, who are in need of ways to be able to continue on with the skills that they have. So some of our, I would say that not explicitly, but more of a wider community range. My work really looks at the policy and policy development within agriculture and also food security. And then related to that is doing the external research and talking to our various communities all over the state to be able to see how can our office support our families, how can we support our communities to know that agriculture is the #1 industry within the state of Illinois. And then if that is, how can we get more of our Black and Brown students into that pipeline in various aspects of the agriculture industry? In addition to that, how do we work with our industries to be able to partner with local organizations that are helping with food security issues, and then coupled with educational initiatives to be able to impact our local communities who are in fact impacting the very needs or supplying the very needs that our families locally have. And so I know it's a very, very big range, but it's not explicit. So.
No, but that speaks to it. Thank you so much. So it's open for anyone that has a question. You can unmute yourself and ask. You can type it in the chat. This is the time for you to engage Dr. Ogwal. Oh, I see Burns has a hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and speak, Burns.
It's me. Hi, Susan. It's good seeing you. So this is always a question that comes up for me when we talk about Blackness and the diversity within Blackness in the United States. And one thing that I wondered when you got to, especially theme 5, I think it was when you mentioned that the participant was talking about being a part of a minority group and recognizing that. And so what I was wondering was something I don't know why I didn't wonder this before was that, I guess my question is, was this would you say that this was a study about the participants realizing how racialization affected them, or were they thinking more in terms of being a part of a group that's more diverse, like immigrant group, being biased against, or being biased, like people being biased against immigrants, being biased against difference, but not necessarily that, okay, this is because I'm Black. Like, did they essentially look at, okay, I'm dealing with some stuff because I'm Black, or was it mostly like a class status thing that was sort of separate from race? And I know that you do mention, like in your sort of interpretations of what was going on, that race is playing a factor. It's a factor, it's playing a role in all of this. But I'm wondering if that was actually something that came out from the participants, that they're like, wait a minute, when I'm here, as opposed to where I'm from, when I'm here, it's what I am, and what I am first is Black, and then it's immigrant, and then it's these other things. And I'm asking this question because I think it's also important in thinking about how people from African countries come here and transition, or how their transition takes place, and how support systems can be developed if they're, if people are struggling with the fact that they're now racialized in a way that they've never thought of it before. Are they getting support that they're like, okay, so I'm getting support because I'm also an immigrant, I'm also, maybe like English isn't my first language, maybe that's it, but so okay, so I'll just stop and let you answer.
Okay, so I will try to address the question as best as I can. This particular person, he is actually one of, I think, 3 total African and Black doctors in the entire hospital that he works at. He's also the only one of, I believe, 2 in the hospital that's coming from Congo. So for him, when he talks about this particular area, it was a multi-layered. First, recognizing that, and I didn't put the other parts of the quote there, but he talked about recognizing the fact that now he's considered Black, but he's also recognizing in that particular line that for him, he knows that there's layers in terms of being Black and immigrant, and that's what, like, it stands out for him specifically. So when I think about his experience and what he has shared with me, I would say that he's tackling both aspects of it, even though in that specific line, it can be specifically interpreted towards, now I'm considered a Black person, and I recognize that they see me as a Black person first before they see me or hear or recognize me as an immigrant because of my language. And he talks about that in previous conversation about just the language dynamics and what that looked like for him as well. So I think, to me, that in multiple conversations that I've had also with other African immigrants, that the issue often, excuse me, the issue often is this recognition of being racialized in the US, and even as African students, being racialized in America in a way that we weren't before. Back at home, you're more recognized because of either your name is associated with a particular tribe, or maybe because of the way you speak. So you come from a particular region of your country, or a region of Africa in and of itself. So when a person is coming here and learning to navigate the US, it now becomes very multi-layered. And sometimes some of us in our African community, we don't want to talk about the racialization that we're experiencing. We want to just get to the point of, I need a job, I need to make money quickly, and I need to send money home, and I need to support those who are, those who I care about from home. Which, by the way, again, Uganda also sends one of the largest amounts of remittances to support our home country. And so when you have highly educated people in the diaspora from all over, the continent, who are sending money home. That's another aspect of why immigration becomes such an important topic for us to discuss and to really recognize as impacting our very communities and the opportunities that we have here. I hope I answered your question. Okay, great.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I see two questions here, perhaps three questions, but from two people. I'll start with Paul's question.
Yes.
What or where are some resources that Africans on the continent who apply for the DV can use that will help them navigate the process? As you know, many people don't understand necessarily the process, what documents are needed, don't understand the application process, or don't speak the language. And many don't have access to the internet. So they resort to using middlemen who charge them fees. So basically they're trying to ask, where will people get information about applying for the DV lottery? So
I will say, unfortunately, there is no main resource outside of when you look on the U.S. state government website for DV lottery application, the official application. It will give you a step-by-step process as far as what is required. At that point, it's going to be up to you, for whether you're in your home country or not, to be able to acquire those documents. So unfortunately, I currently cannot find a specific website, and it could be me now. It may have changed a little bit within the last year, but there's no one particular organization that I know of that highlights or works specifically with DV lottery applicants. Everything is done on an individual basis. And that is why in some countries you will find those who are exploiting that, because now they are trying to make people pay them to be able to navigate the process in their home countries for them, to help them figure out the documents and things like that, when the application itself is free. There is no cost to the application, but unfortunately, some of that is being exploited. Number two, what are some of the local resources, excuse me, within Illinois or Central Illinois that our newly arrived immigrants can use? So one of the training programs or organizations that I would highlight is looking up Upwardly Global, and I'll send you that, Dr. Choti. Upwardly Global out in Chicago is probably the closest that you can find in terms of training programs. And they give you actually a list of the highly trained areas in which they give you the policies from Illinois State. And then it gives you kind of a little bit of direction about what needs to happen if you want to get your license to practice in those areas, whether it's architecture or engineering, or if it's the medical sector and so forth. Upwardly Global is one that I would definitely recognize. In terms of transition programs, out here within Central Illinois, we've actually exploded with quite a few. So I would definitely highlight the work of the New Americans Welcome Center out of our University of Illinois. They're doing fantastic work in terms of helping to connect resources together for our local immigrant population. Then we have Immigrant Services of Champaign, Urbana. That's also then this particular group provides actual materials. So if you're moving into a home, they help get you set up with clothing, food, furniture, things like that. Then we have the Refugee Center, which also works at and helps with documentation, especially with documentation, excuse me. Also some transitional resources and paying for maybe electricity or water, things like that, rent. Then there's also Immigration Project, which does a lot of, they are lawyers, which deals particularly with the legal services that's needed. Because unfortunately, within Central Illinois, we literally have maybe 5 immigration lawyers here, but our population stands at, I think, if I'm last correct, over 200,000 plus residents here. So we have quite a bit of work to do within our legal sector there to be able to help them adjust. Otherwise, you have folks like me who are called upon to assist with transitional services. And as I'm sure some of you may have done, you found someone on campus, you asked them questions, or our Centers for African Studies, they can be of big help because they either know someone who's doing the work that's not official, but at least can help you, make you feel like you're home, and help you get connected to a couple of services or a few things that you may need in your local area. And then I see the question here by Judith. Are there any differences between Black Africans and Black Africans? I would absolutely say certainly. Excuse me. And I say that because we cannot, as Africans, assume that we know what it's like to be Black American, meaning being born and native to America here. We cannot necessarily take on that story, but yet we can partner up with similar experiences. And I say this because we both have a history of oppression. So when you look at the US, you're talking about slavery, you're talking about Jim Crow laws, you're talking about oppressive policies and civil rights movement. You're talking about then now in the most current wave, mass incarceration. On the other side, on the continent, you're also talking about oppression in the form of colonization, and then also continuous oppressive regimes that continue to find their ways within politics. A lot of different aspects of the law, or either being supported or not supported in that aspect, and so on and so forth. So there's differences in identity-wise, there's differences about our language, dialect, there's differences just in our experiences in some of those realms. But I will say that both populations can share in the struggle and say that, yes, we do know what it means to be Black as a part of the Black diaspora. And we know what it's like to be looked at funny. We know what it's like to not be respected because of the way we speak. We know what it's like to be treated as second-class citizens in some instances. So I would say that there are differences and both similarities. I think what we have to do is that we have to be able to look upon each other with respect of our experiences, and also know, even as African students who are coming to the US, that is a level of privilege that most Africans don't have, or going to the UK to study. That is a huge privilege that a lot of students back home don't have. And the same here, if you look at students who may be Black students who may be going to Harvard or Yale and so forth, there are many students who don't necessarily have those same opportunities here. And so I would definitely say that there are differences between our Black American friends and family members versus being Black and African and in America. I hope that answered your question, Judith.
Looks like Judith is trying to connect back.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's great. Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type your question on the chat as well. And I agree with you, Susan, about the point you made about having a connection with the community where you are. Mm-hmm. For example, around here, we have many groupings. We have for example, not African, but Association of Kenyans in Lansing. Mm-hmm. So through these types of channels is where you get to see information that is not publicly shared, or even if it could be publicly shared, not everybody would go to the US government website to be able to retrieve that information from there. So at least with these types of organizations locally, you get to learn more, because there are people perhaps who have gone through that process or have been supported by a particular resource that will be. So I agree with you that if you are able to be connected with some organization, some community grouping that you think would be beneficial to you, that's the best way to get some information, or to even have a community of people that can be able to encourage you, work with you. Yeah, so.
And I also want to, I just thought about that aspect of community. You know, community doesn't have to be only being on campus. So I would really encourage you all to get connected beyond the campus so that you can see life beyond campus if you aren't already doing that. And it makes a big difference. Sometimes it's just going to someone's house after Sunday church and they have food from home, cooked food from home that you know that you're not going to get at the campus cafeteria or any of the campus restaurants, you know, and it makes a big difference to feel like home. I also wanted to make a point about being connected to our Black American friends and family members or community members, and recognizing that we may not share the history, but again, we share some aspects of what it means to struggle here in the US. And it may not even be the same struggles, but to always, at least, I encourage many of our African students and also immigrants to recognize that were it not for our Black American friend, the history of Black America, especially pivoting towards the civil rights movement, we would not be able to come to the US as African students. We would not be able to do what we do. So while there may be a lot of differences in the way we talk or think or personally think individually, there's still some things that we can do to honor the history that has been here and to know that there's something that we can contribute to that as well. So, yes.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that one. I see Judith's hand is up. Judith, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Susan. I think I was trying to speak to the fact that, like, from my experience, for example, talk about you find when they say Black American, they don't include Africans. So opportunities are given to Black Americans and Africans are being sidelined. And then, we like me and a few friends, we've had to fix that and say, you are giving opportunities to Americans, literally Africans. So in that sense, like, I was asking, have you seen that kind of difference that Africans are being kind of sidelined because we are not?
Oh, I think Susan's internet is breaking. Judith, I meant. Judith, are you back? Oh, she didn't get to conclude her thought.
I think. Go ahead, Judith.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, like that's something that I've really, like in my department, there are slots for, minority students. They say Black Americans, and then Africans, we aren't Black Americans. We have our own unique experience. Yes, we are all we are a bit different. So Black Americans take Africans are blind. To look at us as something that we are not in a way. Used such experiences, or it's only me and a few friends.
Sure. So unfortunately, I think, to be honest with you, it's going to depend on the community that you live in. Our community here has been very intentional about being welcoming to immigrants here, so much to the point where we have a national agenda, and even our governor most recently has signed some pieces of policy that will point to making Illinois one of the most welcoming states for immigrants in Illinois. And that's broad scale. Now, I say that to say that I've seen it opposite, right? So I've seen both sides where in one of our departments, which I won't mention, you will find that when you're looking at the aspects of Black students, African students actually dominate that particular, department, especially when you're looking at the graduate student level. So which is very, very different from many other, actually my department actually has more Black American students, or one of the largest Black American students population within its department. And again, looking at things from a graduate perspective. So I think that it depends on the community in general that you live in, and what intentional efforts are being made for citizens to create a welcoming space. I also think that unfortunately, it's a easy national narrative to point to either one group or somebody in a way that says or blames people for why there's a lack of opportunity. I will say that that as much as, and I say that delicately, I really, really believe that unfortunately, the system, and again, thinking about the systems, the way that our educational systems have been brought up, the way that our legal system has been raised up, and I'm talking about here in the US, is that it's pitted people against one another. And it's created this narrative that, okay, even when I'm looking at the research, most workplaces are still preferring white Americans as their primary person to be able to select for that job, despite the fact that maybe a minority person or someone who comes from a marginalized community is well qualified or even more qualified than that person, than their white counterpart. So the research is out there. And so when you're looking at some of those disparities, really it comes down to, again, finding ways to create a welcoming space within your own community. Sometimes it takes having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, just somebody that you know that you can say, you know what, this is how I'm feeling. How do we communicate better as Black citizens of this nation? You know, I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy. I'm not going to say that everyone's going to accept the fact, you know, that you're coming from Africa, or this person is coming from the South Side of Chicago, you know, all of those things. But I think this is where that you have to recognize that, and sometimes accept the fact that some people are just not going to accept you regardless of where you come from, no matter how much you can contribute and so on and so forth. So I think that right now there are some critical conversations that have to be made. There has to be an understanding of the history of the rejection of Black Americans in this country, and how Black America has been treated, and how Black America continues to be treated. Because on the other side, you will find that in other parts of the US, Africans are being treated in what some people would call better than Black Americans. And when I say treated better, it could be that more jobs are preferring on that side of the region of the US, Black Africans taking up those positions versus Black Americans taking up those positions. So we can continue to have this conversation offline, but just to keep in mind those things, I think it just depends on the region that you're in and the community that you're in. And then just sometimes taking it upon yourself and saying, you know what, we're not trying to take up anything from anyone. We're just trying to make life better for ourselves as much as possible, just like you are. We're all trying to make our lives better. And what can we do collectively to make sure that our administrations on campus or our community leaders know that we're coming together to make a statement to say, hey, we need better opportunities, and we don't want to be shut out of these opportunities that are here before us. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's a hard one. It's a hard one, Judith. There are no easy answers to that.
No, you've definitely responded to that question very well and responded to for others like us who could be having the same question as well. So what basically I hear you say is that there's need, or it's important to think as global Africa. Like it makes sense from whichever standpoint you are, because as you said, we might not necessarily be able to understand one another's experiences or even fit in those shoes. But that's not where we're supposed to bank our thinking on. We're supposed to think about how can we move together as a community with perhaps different or shared experiences, but we'll see a need of growing together as a community of like-minded people. And sorry about that. I really want to thank you so much, Susan, for that. It's a hard topic when it comes to immigration issues, when it comes to discussing things that are directly touching people's lives, lived experiences. It's kind of hard, but I definitely appreciate and the fact that you brought it from the standpoint of your study. It's things that you've not just heard from people, you've researched, and you're bringing us data that is concrete from people's experiences. And we want to thank you so much for that. And I see Don is still here. I think it's 11, 12. Is it going to 12 for you, Don?
Thank you, Don.
Yes. Yeah, it was, I couldn't, like the conversation was so interesting. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if nobody has a question right now, I want to maybe end it here. But before we do, I wanted to make an announcement that tomorrow, for those who are within the Lansing area, we have a welcoming event for new students, new scholars, new visitors to MSU. And it's going to happen on campus. It's in person. Please come if you have time to be able to engage with old, new friends and have fun. At least it's a rainy day. I'm hoping tomorrow it doesn't rain, but I'm looking forward to seeing many of you. I think the flyers went out. If you haven't had that information, please email me. Oh, that's done. It's okay. So
I just want to say that sounds like a wonderful event. I wish I were in the Lansing area. I'm in Ann Arbor, so I'm at University of Michigan. So that's good to,
I know it's an annual event. We really try to create a community around here as much as we can, because we know there are people like Paul is one new person to the community, Olawale, Muta is not. So at least for people to be able to see faces, sometimes people have come during the pandemic, and some people don't even know exactly where they are. They don't know whether there are any community around here, and the welcoming event helps people to just see faces and be able to interact better than when we were doing it on Zoom. We were fortunate enough to be able to do it in person this year, because last year we had to do it on Zoom. But we're planning to have that tomorrow, at least for our new members. I'm excited. I always look forward to that event. So if you haven't seen that flyer, please email me and I'll be able to share that. But I think it went out, and I'm believing everybody got it. So again, I want to thank our presenters, Dr. Ogwal and Don. I think perhaps Don has left. It's a pleasure actually to have you. It's not always a guarantee, but we appreciate that you're able to facilitate discussions that touch on people's lives, I would say. Yeah, and this was very informational, and we definitely appreciate and look forward. And please join in anytime. It doesn't have to be today. We have another one coming up in 2 weeks. If you have a chance, it's the same link. You don't have to sign in again. You can just use the same link you used today, join in, share in the discussion as much as time allows. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks or tomorrow for those who are around. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Choti.
Bye.
Bye-bye.